Imagine an entire colony over 100 men, women, and children vanishing into thin air, leaving behind just one haunting word carved into a post, CROATOAN, for centuries. Historians, archaeologists, and conspiracy theorists have debated what happened to the Lost Colony of Roanoke. Was it disease? Was it an attack? Or something far more mysterious? Today, we're finally uncovering 10 shocking secrets that may hold the answers to America's oldest unsolved mystery. Welcome back to your channel name, where we dig deep into the world's most perplexing mysteries and forgotten histories. Today, we're diving into one of America's greatest enigmas, the Lost Colony of Roanoke. From secret maps to strange artifacts and even DNA evidence, new discoveries have emerged that could change everything we thought we knew. Stay with us as we uncover 10 shocking secrets that might finally solve this 400-year-old mystery. It was the year 1587 when a group of more than 100 men, women, and children set sail across the Atlantic with hopes of building a new life in the New World. Led by Governor John White, they arrived on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina, full of ambition and dreams for a better future. They were not soldiers or explorers this time. They were families. Farmers, craftsmen, and even children made up the colony. This wasn't just another expedition. This was meant to be a permanent English settlement in America, a bold step toward creating a new world across the ocean. Yet what happened to them would become one of the most baffling mysteries in American history, one that would puzzle historians, archaeologists, and curious minds for centuries. The early days of the colony were difficult. Supplies were running low, relations with some of the Native American tribes were tense, and the colonists were struggling to adapt to the harsh realities of their new environment. Governor White knew that they couldn't survive much longer without help. So, in a desperate bid to save his people, he decided to sail back to England to gather supplies and reinforcements. It was supposed to be a quick trip, a matter of months at most, but history had other plans. When White returned to England, he found his homeland gripped by war with Spain, and every available ship was being used to defend against the mighty Spanish Armada. His pleas to return to Roanoke were delayed again and again. Days turned into months, months into years. By the time John White finally managed to make his way back across the Atlantic, it was August of 1593, long years since he had left his colony behind. What he found when he stepped onto the shores of Roanoke Island was nothing short of chilling. The settlement was deserted. Homes stood empty, weathered by time, their roofs collapsing. Tools lay scattered as if dropped in a hurry. There were no signs of life, no fires burning, no voices calling out, no footprints in the sand. It was as though the entire colony had simply vanished into thin air. The only clue left behind was a single word carved into a wooden post: CROATOAN. On a nearby tree, the letters CRO were also etched, almost as if someone had started to carve the full word but never finished. There was no sign of struggle, no human remains, nothing to indicate an attack or mass illness. The colonists were simply gone. White had instructed the colonists before he left that if they were forced to leave the settlement, they should carve the name of their new destination into a post or tree. If they were in danger, they should also carve a cross above it. There was no cross. That suggested they had left voluntarily, perhaps heading to CROATOAN Island, known today as Hatteras Island, home to a friendly Native American tribe allied with the English. But bad weather prevented White from searching the island, and he was forced to return to England empty-handed, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt history books for centuries. This was not just any disappearance. This was the first English colony in the Americas, a place meant to be the foundation of future settlements, and yet it vanished without a trace. Over 100 men, women, and children, including Governor White's own granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World, were gone. No letters, no witnesses, no clear explanation. It was as though the earth had swallowed them whole. And with each passing year, the mystery only deepened. Theories began to emerge, ranging from hostile attacks by nearby tribes to starvation, disease, or even assimilation into native communities. But none could be proven. Not a single piece of definitive evidence surfaced to reveal their fate. The Lost Colony of Roanoke became more than just a historical puzzle. It became a legend, a haunting tale passed down through generations. Writers, historians, and treasure hunters alike have all tried to uncover the truth, but each clue seemed to lead to more questions than answers. Some claim the colonists were wiped out by disease or drought. Others insisted they were killed by rival tribes. A few even suggested something far stranger, a supernatural curse, perhaps, or forces beyond our understanding. Whatever the case, the disappearance of the Roanoke colonists has remained one of the most enduring unsolved mysteries of the last 4 centuries, a riddle carved into the very fabric of American history, waiting for someone to finally decipher it. When Governor John White returned to Roanoke in 1590, after 3 long and desperate years, he expected fear, chaos, maybe even tragedy, but he didn't expect silence. He walked through what was once a thriving colony and found only abandoned homes, empty pathways, and wind whistling through the wooden walls. But in the middle of this unsettling stillness, one thing stood out like a scream frozen in time. The word CROATOAN carved into a post. It wasn't hastily scratched or carved in panic. It was deliberate, bold, as if someone wanted to leave a message for the world to find. On a nearby tree, the letters CRO appeared again, as though someone had begun to carve the full word, but was interrupted before they could finish. For John White, this was both a clue and a puzzle, a sign of hope and dread all at once. Before leaving for England years earlier, White had instructed the colonists that if they ever had to move the settlement, they should carve the name of their new destination so rescuers could find them. If they were in danger, they were to add a cross above the word as a warning. There was no cross. That one detail suggested the colonists had left willingly rather than fleeing from an immediate threat. But here's where the mystery deepens, because this single word, CROATOAN, has sparked centuries of debate, countless theories, and some of the wildest speculation you can imagine. So what did it mean? At the time, CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, about 50 miles south of Roanoke, known today as Hatteras Island. It was also the name of the Native American tribe that lived there, a group with whom the English had established friendly relations in the past. To John White, this seemed like the obvious answer. The colonists had gone to live with the CROATOAN tribe. Perhaps they sought safety, food, or simply a chance at survival. Maybe they had abandoned the struggling colony to start fresh among allies. That would explain why there was no cross, no sign of danger, but there was a problem. A sudden storm blew in as White prepared to sail to Croatian Island and investigate. His crew was reluctant to risk the dangerous waters, supplies were running low, and before long, White was forced to return to England without ever setting foot on Croatian Island to search for the colonists. That was his one chance, the moment that might have given us answers, lost to history because of bad weather and bad timing. From that point onward, the word CROATOAN became less of a clue and more of a haunting symbol, the final whisper left behind by over 100 vanished souls. Over the centuries, this single word has taken on a life of its own. Historians have debated its meaning endlessly. Some argue it was nothing more than a straightforward message. The colonists went to CROATOAN Island. Case closed. Others believe it was far more mysterious. Could it have been a warning, a code? A clue to something deeper, something hidden from plain sight? And then there are the stranger theories, the ones that blur the line between history and legend. Some claim CROATOAN was tied to ancient curses, pointing to other eerie coincidences where the word appeared in connection to disappearances and deaths throughout history. For example, the American writer Edgar Allan Poe reportedly whispered the word Croatian on his deathbed before dying under mysterious circumstances. In another case, the infamous stagecoach robber Blackbart, after escaping capture for years, carved the word CROATOAN into the wall of his cell before vanishing from historical records entirely. Even in the early 20th century, when a ship called the Carroll A. Deering ran aground off the coast of North Carolina with its entire crew missing, the word CROATOAN was found scrawled on one of the ship's masts. Coincidence? Or was there something darker connected to this word? Skeptics dismiss these connections as legends piled on top of an already unsolved mystery, but they add layers of intrigue that keep the story alive centuries later. Because what began as a practical message, carved by desperate colonists, has become something much bigger, a symbol of vanishing, of disappearance without explanation, a single word echoing through time with no clear answer. And here is the most haunting part. When archaeologists and historians finally explored Hatteras Island centuries later, they did find some evidence suggesting Europeans had lived there, items like tools, pottery, and weapons dating back to the right time period. But nothing conclusive ever tied these artifacts directly to the lost Roanoke colonists. No graves, no records, no proof of what happened to them after carving that single word. It was as though they had left behind a breadcrumb trail that led only to more questions. As if the word CROATOAN was the beginning of a story we were never meant to finish. For centuries, the mystery of the lost colony lingered like a fog no one could lift. And yet one of the most overlooked clues wasn't the ruins of Roanoke or on the shores of Croatian Island. It was hidden in plain sight, buried in the folds of a centuries-old map. Back in the late 1500s, before he left for England, John White wasn't just the governor of the colony, he was also a skilled artist and cartographer. He created detailed maps of the New World, documenting coastlines, settlements, and landmarks with precision. These maps were stored away in archives for hundreds of years, studied by historians and researchers countless times. But it wasn't until the 21st century that someone noticed something strange, something White himself might have hidden deliberately. In 2012, scholars at the British Museum were examining White's original map of coastal Virginia and North Carolina when they discovered patches on the paper, tiny pieces of fabric glued onto certain areas. At first, they thought they were simple corrections, the kind of thing map makers often did when they made mistakes. But when researchers used advanced imaging technology to look beneath the patches, what they found changed everything. Beneath one patch, hidden for more than 400 years, was a faint symbol, the outline of a fort. Not just any fort, but one that didn't appear anywhere else on White's maps or in any historical record from the time. Why would he have drawn it, then deliberately covered it up? Did he know something about the colony's fate that he wasn't ready to reveal? This hidden fort, located about 50 miles inland from Roanoke Island, near the Chowan River, became the focus of intense speculation. Some historians suggested that this might have been the colony's secret destination, a place they had planned to move for better protection and access to resources. If the colonists had left Roanoke voluntarily, as the carving of CROATOAN suggested, maybe they hadn't gone to Hatteras Island at all. Maybe they had followed a plan that only John White and a few others knew about, a plan hidden in the very maps he created. Archaeologists launched expeditions to this area, which became known as Site X. Over the years, they uncovered artifacts, fragments of pottery, pieces of metal, tools that seemed European in origin and dated back to the right time period. Some items even matched the kind of supplies the Roanoke colonists would have had. It was enough to make headlines, enough to suggest that at least some of the colonists might have moved inland and lived there for a time. But once again, the evidence stopped short of being conclusive. There were no documents, no personal belongings clearly linked to any of the colonists by name. Just fragments, whispers of lives lived and lost, like echoes fading into the soil. What makes this hidden fort clue so compelling is the secrecy surrounding it. Why would John White, a man desperate to find his family and friends, cover up the symbol in the first place? Some believe he was hiding the colony's plans from the Spanish, who were England's rivals at the time and would have attacked any English settlement they found. Others think White might have had intelligence about the colony's fate that he never shared publicly. Knowledge he buried literally in the map itself. It's a theory that suggests layers of intrigue far beyond a simple disappearance. And then there's the possibility that the fort wasn't built by the colonists at all. Some researchers argue the symbol might have represented a plan that was never carried out, a destination the colonists never actually reached. If that's true, then the map clue becomes even murkier, a might have been rather than a real solution. Still, the discovery reignited interest in the lost colony like nothing else in recent years. For the first time in centuries, there was a concrete lead, a place where spades in the ground could connect to a mystery carved into wood and whispered through time. Yet even as archaeologists dug deeper, uncovering more shards of pottery, pieces of gun barrels, and other European artifacts, questions multiplied. Were these items left by the Roanoke colonists or by later settlers who moved through the same area? Did the colonists split into smaller groups, some going to CROATOAN Island, others moving inland toward this hidden fort? Or did something else happen entirely, something that left behind maps, carvings, and clues, but no final chapter? What makes this clue so powerful is how it ties together everything we think we know about Roanoke, the carving of CROATOAN suggesting a move, the empty settlement hinting at an organized departure rather than sudden destruction, and now a secret fort hidden under a patch on a centuries-old map, as though the past itself wanted to keep its secrets just a little longer. For centuries, the mystery of the lost colony seemed frozen in time, a story locked away with no hope of resolution. But then, slowly, spade by spade, shovel by shovel, archaeologists began unearthing pieces of a puzzle long buried beneath layers of soil and centuries of silence. It started with small discoveries, fragments of pottery, bits of metal, the kind of things that might seem ordinary to anyone else. But to researchers, each object felt like a whisper from the past, a chance to hear the voices of people who vanished more than 400 years ago. One of the first significant sites to draw attention was Hatteras Island, the very place suggested by the carved word CROATOAN. Archaeologists digging there uncovered items that seemed distinctly European in origin. A sword hilt, a slate writing tablet with faint lettering still visible after centuries, fragments of pottery known as borderware commonly used in England in the late 16th century. None of these items proved beyond a doubt that Roanoke's colonists had lived and died there, but they hinted at the presence of Europeans in the right place at the right time. It was enough to stir excitement among historians who had spent lifetimes chasing shadows. But then came another site about 50 miles inland from Roanoke, known as Site X. Excavations there revealed even more tantalizing clues: pieces of metal armor, copper rings, nails, gun hardware, and more borderware pottery. The style of the artifacts dated precisely to the period of the Lost Colony, suggesting English settlers had at least passed through the area, maybe even lived there for a time. Yet the mystery deepened because nothing found so far told a clear story. Were these colonists surviving for years after John White left, building new lives away from the coast? Or were these the final traces of people clinging to existence before disaster struck? Archaeologists began to suspect something that changed the entire way we view the lost colony. Maybe the colonists didn't vanish all at once. Maybe they split into smaller groups. Some could have moved inland toward the hidden fort revealed on John White's map, others south to Hatteras Island, and perhaps others still were taken in by friendly native tribes. This would explain why evidence appears in multiple locations, yet never in large enough quantities to represent the entire colony. It also suggests the story didn't end in a single moment of catastrophe, but rather unfolded slowly, fragments of lives scattered like the artifacts left behind. And that leads us to one of the most fascinating aspects of modern research: DNA testing. In recent years, scientists and genealogists have launched projects to trace the possible descendants of Roanoke's colonists. The idea is simple yet revolutionary: if the colonists did assimilate with Native American tribes, as many theories suggest, then perhaps their genetic legacy lives on even if their colony did not. Researchers have collected DNA samples from families in the Carolinas who claim descent from both native tribes and early Europeans, searching for genetic markers that might link back to the lost settlers. So far, the results have been intriguing but inconclusive. Some families carry oral traditions of being descended from the English who disappeared from Roanoke, stories passed down through generations about ancestors with light hair or blue eyes living among native tribes. Genetic studies have shown traces of European ancestry appearing in some native populations earlier than other records would suggest. Yet proving a direct connection to the lost colony has remained elusive. DNA degrades over time, and without confirmed remains of the colonists themselves, there's no definitive genetic reference point to match against. It's like trying to solve a puzzle when you're not sure what the final picture is supposed to look like. Still, the combination of archaeology and genetic science has pushed the mystery further than ever before. Every artifact pulled from the ground, every genetic sample analyzed, adds a new layer of possibility. The writing tablet found on Hatteras Island suggests education and literacy among the colonists, hinting that some may have tried to maintain a sense of normal life even after leaving Roanoke. The border where pottery rare in Native American contexts suggests trade or cohabitation between cultures. The metal tools and weapons hint at adaptation, survival, maybe even defense against unknown threats. Each discovery seems to confirm that the colonists didn't simply vanish into thin air. They moved, adapted, struggled, and left behind traces of their presence waiting for centuries to be uncovered. But the full story: who lived, who died, who assimilated, who left descendants carrying fragments of English blood and native heritage, remains just out of reach. Like a picture slowly coming into focus but never fully clear when a mystery lasts for more than 4 centuries. Facts and legends begin to intertwine until no one can tell where history ends and myth begins. That's exactly what happened with the Lost Colony of Roanoke. The moment John White found the settlement abandoned and carved with the word CROATOAN, the story slipped from the realm of simple history into something larger, something that fired the imagination of generations. Over time, each retelling added layers of speculation, fear, and wonder until the line between reality and fantasy blurred beyond recognition. The truth became harder to find not because it disappeared, but because it became buried beneath centuries of stories people wanted to believe. One of the earliest myths claimed the colony was wiped out in a single violent act, that hostile native tribes attacked and killed the settlers soon after White left for England. For decades, this theory dominated history books, painting the local tribes as villains. But modern research paints a far more complex picture. While there were indeed tensions between some tribes and the English, others, like the CROATOANs, were known allies. There is no evidence of mass graves, no weapons left behind in panic, no signs of burning or destruction at the settlement. If there had been a sudden attack, there would likely have been at least some physical trace. Instead, everything points to an orderly departure, as if the colonists left on their own terms rather than through violence. Then came the stories of starvation and disease, the idea that the colony simply withered away under the harsh conditions. Of the New World, it's true that food shortages were common and diseases could spread rapidly in close quarters. But again, the site showed no signs of bodies hastily buried or left unburied, no signs of people dying in large numbers all at once. Starvation may have played a role over time, especially if small groups tried to survive on their own, but it doesn't explain the complete disappearance without a trace. The colony wasn't found filled with skeletons. It was found empty. The mystery deepened further when later settlers claimed to have seen Europeans living among native tribes in the decades after Roanoke vanished. Several reports from the early 1600s described native people with gray eyes or lighter hair, even speaking English words or practicing European customs. Some explorers claim to have encountered tribes that wove cloth like the English or built houses resembling those of the colonists. These accounts fueled the theory that the settlers assimilated, either by choice or necessity, marrying into native tribes and merging their lives with theirs. Yet, because these reports were written years after the fact and often secondhand, historians argue about whether they can be trusted or whether they were simply stories told to explain the unexplainable. And then, of course, there are the legends that leap far beyond history into the realm of the supernatural. Some claim the entire colony fell victim to a curse, pointing to the strange coincidences surrounding the word CROATOAN appearing in other mysterious disappearances throughout history. Others speak of witchcraft, of dark forces in the forests of the New World swallowing the settlers whole. By the 19th and 20th centuries, writers and poets were spinning tales of ghosts, demons, even alien abductions, each trying to outdo the last in creating the most dramatic explanation possible. None of these stories had a shred of evidence behind them, but they captivated the public imagination in ways that dry historical facts rarely do. What makes it even more complicated is that fragments of truth hide inside the myths. For instance, drought records taken from tree rings show that the Roanoke settlers arrived during one of the worst droughts in the region's history. Crops would have failed. Food would have been scarce. Starvation might not explain everything, but it could explain why the colonists left Roanoke for somewhere with more resources. Likewise, the reports of English-speaking natives might be exaggerated, But if even one of them were true, it would support the idea that some settlers survived by joining tribes. Over the centuries, treasure hunters, amateur historians, and even professional archaeologists chased these myths, digging in the sands of Hatteras Island, combing through native oral traditions, searching abandoned forts inland, each hoping to find the one piece of evidence that would prove a theory right or wrong. Yet every discovery only seemed to add new layers to the story instead of simplifying it. A single silver ring found in the soil might suggest English settlers lived there, but was it left by the Roanoke colonists or by traders decades later? A European axe head in a native village might point to assimilation, or it might be the result of trade between tribes and later English ships. The more we find, the more the myths and facts seem to tangle together until separating them feels almost impossible. And this is the heart of the problem. The mystery lasted so long that it stopped belonging only to history and became part of legend, part of America's cultural memory. Each generation added its own fears and fantasies, turning the Lost Colony into everything from a tragic survival story to a ghost tale told around campfires. For more than 4 centuries, the Lost Colony of Roanoke has remained one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. And as each clue surfaces, a dozen new questions seem to follow. Historians, archaeologists, and researchers have pieced together evidence bit by bit, and while we may be closer than ever to understanding what happened, the full truth still seems to slip through our fingers like sand. Yet several leading theories have emerged over the years, each offering its own explanation, its own version of the fate that befell those more than 100 men, women, and children who vanished without a trace. One of the most enduring theories is that the colonists assimilated with friendly Native American tribes, most likely the CROATOANs on Hatteras Island or perhaps others further inland. This would explain the absence of badas, the lack of signs of violence, and the reports from later explorers who claimed to have seen European-looking individuals among native tribespeople with lighter hair or eyes, people who spoke some English or built houses in a European style. Archaeological discoveries on Hatteras Island, like fragments of European tools and pottery dating back to the right time period, lend some support to this theory. The colonists may have abandoned their struggling settlement and chosen survival over isolation, blending into native communities so completely that within a generation, their English identity disappeared altogether. But skeptics argue that while assimilation explains some clues, it doesn't account for why not a single record, artifact, or descendant can definitively be linked to the Roanoke colonists even after centuries of searching. Another theory points to the hidden fort discovered beneath the patch on John White's original map. Perhaps the colonists didn't go to CROATOAN Island at all, but instead moved inland toward this secret location, hoping to find safety and fertile land away from the dangers of the coast. Excavations at what researchers call Site X have uncovered tantalizing artifacts borderware pottery, gun parts, metal tools that date to the late 16th century and suggest some kind of European presence. Maybe the colonists split into smaller groups, some heading to the fort, others to Hatteras Island, scattering in a desperate attempt to survive in an unforgiving land. Yet the evidence here is frustratingly incomplete. The artifacts could just as easily have come from later English expeditions or from trade between natives and Europeans, leaving the question of the colony's fate hanging in the air with no definitive answer. Then there is the theory of disaster, starvation, disease, or conflict, slowly wiping out the colonists over time. Tree ring studies reveal that the colony was established during one of the worst droughts in the region's history, a period when crops would have failed, freshwater sources would have dried up, and relations with native tribes could have turned hostile as resources became scarce. Some historians suggest the colonists, weakened by hunger and illness, may have been absorbed into tribes out of necessity or perished in small groups, leaving little trace behind. Others point to Spanish hostility toward English expansion in the New World, theorizing that Spanish forces may have attacked and destroyed the colony to prevent England from gaining a foothold in the Americas. Yet again, no archaeological evidence of mass violence or destruction has ever been found at the site, leaving this theory on shaky ground. And then, of course, come the more speculative ideas, the whispers of curses, the tales of supernatural forces, Even suggestions of alien abduction that surfaced in modern times as people tried to explain the inexplicable. These theories capture the imagination because they embrace the mystery rather than solve it, offering a sense of dark romance to the story of a colony swallowed by the unknown. But while they make for great storytelling, historians dismiss them as legends layered on top of an already complex puzzle, distractions from the real clues buried in soil, maps, and oral histories. What makes the mystery of Roanoke so compelling is that none of these theories fully solves it, yet each holds pieces of the truth. Assimilation explains the lack of remains but not the absence of records. The hidden fort offers a destination but no proof of occupation. Starvation and disease make sense in theory but leave no physical evidence behind. Even the artifacts scattered across multiple sites seem to tell fragments of different stories rather than one clear narrative. It's as if the fate of the lost colony exists at the intersection of all these possibilities, a mosaic of survival, struggle, and disappearance rather than a single event frozen in time. And so the question lingers as it has for centuries, haunting every artifact unearthed, every clue studied under a microscope, every theory proposed by experts and enthusiasts alike, because each answer seems to lead not to closure but to more shadows stretching across the history of the New World. More than 4 centuries have passed since John White stepped onto Roanoke Island and found nothing but silence and a single carved word to hint at what had happened. Since then, archaeologists have dug through layers of soil, scientists have analyzed DNA, historians have searched through records and maps, yet the lost colony continues to guard its secrets. Maybe the settlers found refuge with native tribes. Maybe they moved inland to the hidden fort or scattered into smaller groups, surviving for a time before disappearing into history. Or maybe their fate was a mix of all these theories, a story of survival, hardship, and loss too complex to fit into a single explanation. What makes the mystery so enduring isn't just the absence of answers, it's the human element at its core. These were men, women, and children who crossed an ocean in search of a better life, only to vanish so completely that centuries later we're still piecing together fragments of their story. The Lost Colony of Roanoke isn't just a chapter in history. It's a reminder of how fragile human ambition can be when confronted by nature, time, and the unknown. And until the day comes when the final piece of evidence is uncovered, when the last question is finally answered, the mystery of Roanoke will remain one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in the story of America.